let's create some code that uses the length property of an array. So let's make an array, okay? So say for example, we have int brackets, it's an array data type, and then name it, say, ARR. Initialize it, so 1, 2, 3 for the sake of simplicity, terminate with a semicolon. Make these values like 5, -1, 3. Make them a bit more interesting. Now, key observations about this array. First of all, the 5 is at index 0. 3 is at index 2, not 3. So maybe change this value here, okay? So say make this 9. Then I would say 9 is at index 2, not index 3. Length of array, count the entries, there are 3 of them, so that's equal to 3. Now let's imagine we want to go through the entries with a for loop. So we're going to say for int I equals 0 because I took the time to understand that 5 is at index 0. So when I declare I, it's a variable declaration, int I, so data type, name of variable, and then the initial value, which is 0. Then you're going to say I. Now, we have to be careful. We can either hard code where we're going to stop, but we want to use the length property of the array. So I'm going to say the following then. Less than, and then ARR, which is the name of the array. And to access a property, you type a period, and then you access the corresponding property, which happens to be the length property in this case. Now, property in C#, like everything else pretty much in coding, is nothing but just a block of code, okay, that's stored as part of the .NET framework. Okay, so r.length. That means you have an array object, it has a length property, and you're accessing it, which really just means just call a bit of code so you can return the length of the array. That's it. Okay, so r.length, and then here I++, like that, because we got to increase our indexes. Will this work though? Well, let's see what happens. Console.writeLine, I terminate with a semicolon. Right now, as you can see, we get no errors. Okay, so go over to build here. So build a solution, Control-Shift-B. Give that a second to kick in. Let's see. Okay, so it says here in the output panel down below that 1 has succeeded. Good. Let's run it. So debug start with that debugging. All right, and it prints 0, 1, and 2. So those are just the indexes. Terminate, terminate. Now let's actually use array access notation. You're going to type ARR, the name of your array object, bracket, and then the I, remember, stands in turn for 0, 1, and 2, and then terminate this with a matching bracket symbol. This is different because this should now access the entries. Okay, so debug start with that debugging, Control F5, and as you can see, this prints, on the other hand, the 5, the -1, and the 9 in a column, so it seems to be working. Terminate, terminate. Now, sometimes people don't like the less than, so they put an equal to here. Well, will that work? Let's see what happens in this case. So debug start without debugging, and that doesn't work. That generates what we call an exception right here. You see, system.index out of exception, index out of range exception. Index was outside the bounds of the array. Okay, right here, and then tells you line 10, right? And program.main program is just that, and then main is a method within it. So that's what the member access notation, the little dot indicates. We call that member access. Okay, so main is a member of program, right? Because as you see, the class is called program, and within there you have an object named main, which happens again to be a method, but always pretty much is just a block of code. That's what coding is, really, just blocks of code. So what we need to do now is, if we're going to use this equal to part, remember that the array length has the value 3, correct? In other words, this is as if you were doing this, 3. Well, that means at some point I would have the value 3, so you would have r of 3 like this, in other words. But you can't have that. Why? Because remember, the indexes are 0, 1, and 2, not 3. This 3 represents an index entry, supposedly. There is no 3. There's only the 2 index where the 9 is stored. So for that reason, if you're going to do it this way, sure, you can do it this way. Put an I in here, and then you can use the length property, so r.length. But then you have to subtract 1 this way, because you want to make sure that the highest value you stick in here is 2, which is the last index. So since the length of the array is 3, 3 minus 1 would give you a value of 2 at the last step, and you would get what you need. So start with that debugging here. As you can see, you get 5, -1, and 9. Perfect. Terminate this. Terminate this. Please leave a like if it's been interesting or insightful.